So why do I have this pineapple? It's interesting. Pineapples are a funny fruit. These are very medicinal, by the way. Pineapples are very good for you. I forget exactly what it is, but I think it's one of the antioxidant fruits. But it's a messy, just a nasty thing to cut and get to the meat of the pineapple, right? I had an Asian girlfriend that would cut it. You know how these rows are in the pineapple? She would kind of cut it along there at an angle all the way around. It took her like an hour to cut the pineapple. But, it turned out pretty well. When I do this, I just go and I probably waste a lot of stuff. There's a local store where we get pineapples where I live, and it's run by the Mennonite, which is like the Amish. And they have a pineapple stripping machine. So you just put I've never used it, but you just put the pineapple in there, close the little window, and boom, it's all right there for you. But the reason, I'm not here for a cooking show, okay, ladies and gentlemen? Although I would like to start doing a cooking show. The reason I have the pineapple here, and this one I think is pretty well ripe, smells really good, is that it's a no pain, no gain situation with a pineapple, right? It's a pain in the rear end to cut a pineapple. You have to take a lot of effort to cut a pineapple, to cut the skin off, to get to the center, the juicy center, and then you've got to get the core out as well. You got to cut the top off. And by the way, where I live, you cut the top off and just stick it in the ground and it'll grow, if that gives you any hint of where I live. This is what's going on in our country right now. And I don't like pain. I'm not a good pain person. I would be a horrible birth mother. But I realize what's going down right now. And as I've told you before, I think it was back in February, about a month into the Trump presidency, I said, listen, we're in a paradigm shifting situation, and this is what I meant. And no, I don't like to see my portfolio go down, but I also have learned from history about portfolios dropping, and I'll get into that in just a couple of minutes. But the bottom line is we're doing pineapple right now, and there's pain, but don't buy into it. Remember people like Art Laffer, and I'll get into Art in just a minute, who really is a national treasure. And he's been commenting about the tariff situation, and I'll give you his synopsis, if you will. So it's difficult, and I get sucked into it too. I listen to these people on CNBC, and they're so smart, and they're all saying this is a self-inflicted problem. Well, what was the crash of 2020? You genius people on CNBC and on Wall Street? What was the stock market crash in early 2020 when my portfolio went crash and burn? Well, for that matter, what was the crash of 2008? Those were self-inflicted. The markets are driven by two things, fear and greed. And right now we're in a fear phase and a greed phase, if you look at it from another angle. People selling is people panicking, but they're also being greedy. They believe that I don't know, that the market may not go up again, or maybe they're taking profits, or maybe it's program selling. I don't know. But the bottom line is the market is fearful right now, as Warren Buffett would say, be greedy when people are fearful. So this is total fear mode because of the pineapple situation. Where are the Epstein files? Are you impressed with Pam Bondi? I'm just kind of curious. If you're able to do the chat, if you went over to this, one person did. Thank you. Looper. That's my buddy. Decipher. And he explained how his name is not Lucifer, but he explained me. So if you're able to navigate my site, God bless you, because I can barely do it. Where are the Epstein files? Anybody know? Whoever, I'll just say this, you've got it, you don't agree with your husband or your wife 100%, your boyfriend or girlfriend 100%, right? Of course not. You have arguments. Maybe you don't even have arguments, but you don't always agree. And I'll tell you, whoever handled this first rollout of the Epstein files, the way they did it, ought to be fired from the Trump White House. I don't know who did it. I don't care who did it. If it was the highest ranking member of the administration, they ought to be fired for the way they did that. One of the things that bothered me is they just brought in these, quote, influencers for these binders that they handed out. And that, I understand why they did it, but that's no way to get news out. Because many of these people, these so-called influencers, are considered nut jobs. I'm not going to name names, but that's no way to get the news out. And then when they did do it, and they started sifting through it, there's nothing new here. What the? And now, the Penn Bondi comes out and says, a day later, says, oh, well, I got schnookered. So the files are in New York, and they're going to come. Well, where are they? This whole thing has been a PR debacle, and PR matters. I know you're going to poo-poo that, but I lived PR my entire life. And PR matters. There's an old expression, you only have one shot to make a first impression. And that is true. And you blew your wad, Pam Bondi, and I don't know what to believe now. Where are the Epstein files? It's probably not a life-changing event, but it's emblematic of how you run things. Where are the Epstein files? And why aren't you telling us where they are? Why aren't you giving us a daily update? I don't know. Doge, though, keeps plugging along, and it's a wonderful thing, and God bless Elon Musk for what he's doing. I'm more impressed by Elon Musk every day, because I think he's honest. He may not be 100% right all the time, and maybe you don't agree with him all the time, but he's doing God's work right now, and God bless him for that. And Donald Trump on Air Force One the other day came out and said that Doge had discovered something horrible and incredible. And the reporter immediately asked on Air Force One, well, what is it? And he says, well, I can't tell you right now, but we'll tell you. And then I think just yesterday, Elon was out basically saying the same thing, that they're going to release some information that is horrible and incredible. So what in the wide world of sports are we talking about here? And I don't even want to speculate. But obviously it involves humans, and it involves Washington, D.C., and it involves humans working in Washington, D.C., either in an elected or non-elected capacity. So the mind wanders on that one, and horrible and incredible. I just hope that some of this Doge information, I just wish they weren't meting it out the way they're doing it. I wish they would sit on it and every quarter come out and say, this is what we found, instead of spoon-feeding. And maybe that's what they've decided to do now, because it's been rather quiet. Of course, the judges have unconstitutionally stuck their nose in all this. The Article 3 branch has no role in this, none whatsoever, especially on a nationwide injunction case by case. Absolutely ridiculous. And, the Senate was working on a bill that was going to kneecap these judges, and I don't know where it is, basically saying you cannot issue a unilateral nationwide injunction, you federal court judges. And if you want to do that, they have to use a class action method, which is a high bar, which is why they don't use it. So I say, where's the Epstein files, and where is what is this information? The one thing I worry about in all this, if Elon and President Trump come out and they say there's something horrible and incredible coming out, you better pay it off. I mean, you can't not pay that one off. I want to know what in the wide world of sports that's all about. All right, Pain Today. I'm Graham Ledger, in case you didn't know. Pain Today, MAGA Tomorrow. What does that mean? That is the title of this program today. The title of this program on NPR is Pain Today, MAGA Tomorrow. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean that, what we're living through is a paradigm shift. And I've already alluded to this. I've tried to warn people. Donald Trump told us terrorists were coming. I guess maybe people didn't believe him. If they did, they would have been selling 2 months ago instead of selling into the drop. By the way, for the record, I think this is among the greatest buying opportunities of your time, and I'll finish up that thought in a couple minutes. The paradigm shift includes even discussing eliminating departments. When have you ever heard that, except from me, right? If you followed me over the years, I've been saying eliminate the Department of Education, eliminate the Department of Energy, eliminate the EPA. I don't think we need the ATF. Why do we need the ATF? It can be folded in any of their duties that are important other than limiting Second Amendment rights can be folded into the FBI or any other department. What about nuclear energy and the Energy Department? Same thing. Fold it into whatever department you want. Health and Human Services, that's big. By the way, I hope Elon and Doge goes after Health and Human Services. That is the biggest part of our budget. Fixed amount. That is the biggest part of our budget, hands down. And it's primarily because of Obamacare. Medicare, Medicaid, and all that kind of stuff is in there too, but Obamacare is what blew the lid off of that. So it's a paradigm-shifting moment. Tariffs, eliminating the Department of Education, and any other departments we can eliminate. Laying off hundreds, thousands of employees. I think there's 2 million employees in the federal government. 2 million. So when you lay off a couple thousand, that's a drop in the bucket. Yeah, I know those people have jobs, and they have lives, and they have mortgages, and they have children, all that kind of stuff. Okay, but you are a public servant, ostensibly, and we don't want you to make a career out of you working at the IRS or the EPA. I don't want a career, not just politician, I don't want a person working their entire career in the federal government. It's public service, which means, which is what the framers effectively wanted, and that is you go to DC, you serve, you do your duty, and then you go home. You don't make a career like Maxine Waters out of being an elected official. That's what the framers wanted. And the same thing applies to the non-elected federal workers. Well, what about this really good FBI agent we have, Graham? I don't care. That really good FBI agent needs to be term limited. I'd pick the number. I don't know, 3 years, 5 years. Term limits for all federal workers. All of them. And then that really good federal agent can go and be a private detective in the private sector or join a police force. Whatever. What about Ted Cruz? Ted Cruz is really good. Yeah, he's good. But there's a lot of other Ted Cruzes out there too. Right? You know, if you rotate senators and members of Congress every just one term, I want one term, one and you're done. If I could wave a magic wand, that's what it would be. And by the way, Congress, where are you on this? Huh? And Donald Trump needs to start going down this road. And maybe he will toward the end of his term. Because he's got to work with these people right now. But I suspect toward the end of his term, he's going to start talking about term limits. And the irony is, you know, you have these people saying, well, we can figure out a way to have Donald Trump have a third term. I'm not a fan of that. I'm a fan of sticking to what our rules and our laws are right now. And we can get rid of rules and laws, absolutely. But what I'm a fan of is Congress getting in line with the president and making permanent changes in Washington, D.C., because everything he's doing right now is temporary, including tariffs. You know, these countries, if he signs a tariff deal, can, 3 years from now, tear it up under President Newsom. Oh, I know you people laugh when I say President Newsom, but you know what? Remember the female vote. And I'm not trying to start a sex war here, okay? But remember the 2024 female vote in the presidential election. You females out there, you got a lot of work to do with your sex. Because if you remove the male vote, Kamala Harris wins 400 electoral votes. Did you know that? Yeah. You remove the Y chromosome from this equation, and Kamala Harris is president right now, and none of this would be going on. And I'm not talking tariffs. I'm talking about reducing the size and scope of government, getting rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse. So when you people laugh at the prospect of the greasy-haired governor becoming president of the United States in 2028, don't laugh. We know how women vote. And women vote emotionally. And because everything you guys do is emotional, okay? Everything you do is emotional, whether you want to admit it or not. And I know that's probably why a lot of women I know say they would never want a female president. Well, you don't want a President Newsom either. So women, you need to, you know, you guys do things in groups. You better start grouping together and trying to knock some sense into these female voters. Cutting the IRS. Ha! You know, that's wonderful. I was telling my daughter the other day, you know, the odds of you being audited with all the layoffs at the IRS are going, it's a wonderful thing. Why should you be audited? Just the fact that you're conveying your money to the federal government with your own volition, if you will, but we all know what happens if you don't pay your taxes. Just that act is good enough for me. I am one of these people who believes that the 16th Amendment, 1913, is that year was the darkest year, one of the darkest years in American history. Maybe the darkest year, because we lost the Senate as a representative of the states, and we lost our freedom. Forever tethered to the federal government, our incomes are. That's wrong. That is morally wrong. And by the way, these moronic members of Congress, and that includes plenty of Republicans, who come out and say, and you need to listen for this when you're watching Fox News or whatever you watch, okay? Newsmax. When you have these representatives and these talking heads that come out and say, well, you have to pay for tax cuts. They say you have to pay, the tax cuts have to be paid for. That is economically illiterate, and you need to call people on that, okay? And the reason I say this is the analogy is very simple, and I've used this before, and that is, if your income one year is $100,000, but it goes down the next year to $60,000, you have to adjust your budget and you're spending appropriately, right? Because you have $40,000 fewer dollars, $40,000 fewer dollars with which to work, right? Well, that's the same with the federal government. This mentality that you have to pay for a tax cut tells you immediately, when you hear that, you need to know, number one, the person speaking is an economic illiterate and or he's a Marxist. Because that person is saying, hey, well, this is our budget, and we can't cut our budget. Our budget is, $4 trillion. Well, we can't run Washington, D.C. on $3.5 trillion. That's what they're saying. Yes, you can. And by God, with this pineapple moment in Washington, D.C., the pain, hopefully we will get the gain. This is a visual, by the way. There was one year we had a consultant come into the television station, the CBS affiliate in San Diego, where I was anchoring the news, and they said, try and have as many visuals as you can, because it's a really good thing. People can connect to that. So I have my co-anchor today. My co-anchor is a pineapple. Who was Pineapple Face? That was the Panamanian, deposed Panamanian leader, Manuel Noriega, wasn't it? Old Pineapple Face? I believe so. My buddy Lucifer will tell me if that's correct. I know you're not Lucifer, but I'm sorry, I got distracted. Let me get focused. Selling the Pelosi building in Washington, D.C. That's a paradigm-shifting moment. People are saying, well, you can't sell that building. Why not? Why do we need it? Deporting illegals en masse. Do you remember George W. Bush doing that? George Bush was an open borders Republican, basically. Did George W. Bush build did he build a wall along the border? Of course not. How about ending the Ukraine war? I know it's been kind of backburnered recently because of the talk of the tariffs, But that's a big deal. And Trump is monitoring this. Trump's got a lot of balls in the air right now. But one of them is trying to deal with Vladimir Putin and deal with the Zelensky person. Well, there's a paradigm shifting moment going on in Ukraine right now. And in that conflict. And I'm not taking sides. I've never tried to take sides there. I know that Vladimir Putin is a thug. He's a murdering thug. And I know Zelensky is probably a war criminal. And, you know, it's one of those classics. I don't want to take a side in that one, but I agree with Trump that the killing needs to stop. The conflict needs to stop. Iran? There's basically now the gauntlet's been laid down with Iran. A paradigm-shifting moment. Look, Iran, you either come to the table and make sure that we can inspect and make sure that you never have nukes, or we're going to hit you. And Israel and the United States are completely on the same page on that one. And of course, China. China is our enemy. This is the thing that is amazing to me when people talk about China. They don't seem to connect the dots that, yes, you can get some cheap goods made there. You can make an iPhone there. But China is our enemy. And I'll never forget when word came out during COVID, during the government shutdown ostensibly because of COVID. That's how I describe that period, by the way. And this is how you should describe it, same way. The government shut down ostensibly because of COVID. That's what that period was. But word came out that some 85% of our pharmaceuticals, our antibiotics came out of China. I couldn't believe what I heard. I said to myself, well, if anything good's going to come out of this government shutdown ostensibly because of COVID, it's that we're going to bring back our manufacturing of antibiotics in the United States. Hasn't happened. But guess what? Yeah, President Trump just put a 104% tariff on China. China and now has it retaliated with 84%. I don't know how they come up with these numbers. But in the meantime, President Trump is out there saying, hey, American business, including pharmaceuticals, you should bring your manufacturing back to the United States. Yes. I suppose he could sign an order, or Congress could, yeah, it'd be nice, you know, how about Congress? That we need to have certain things declared as national security items, like John Deere tractors. No, you can't, you could do that. You can't tell them how to run their business, but it needs to be manufactured in the United States, not in Mexico, not in China, but in the United States. Why? Because if we ever need to make tanks, who's going to make the tanks in a war? Same thing with pharmaceuticals. Same thing with airplane parts manufacturing. Imagine if you're at war with China, and all of a sudden they say, okay, no, those airfoils or those hydraulics that you build the F-35s with, sorry. Same thing with rare earth. The American companies that use the rare earths have got to find another source. You have to find another source. Maybe it's in your backyard. I don't know. But you've got to find another source of rare earths. And the paradigm shift may include the Fed. Eliminate the Fed? I don't think we need the Fed. Elon Musk came out the other day and he said something so funny. They asked him, should you eliminate the Fed? And he said, well, in his kind of stuttering kind of way, I've often looked at that magic 8 ball, and I've thought that maybe the magic 8 ball could do as well as the Fed. The magic 8 ball where you ask, is it going to rain today? And you turn it upside down and it says, maybe, come back tomorrow kind of thing. Well, that's kind of what the Fed is like. Oh, maybe, come back tomorrow. I believe that interest rates, half the time they float based on market forces, and they're floating right now. They're going up, right? The 10-year, I think, is up. Because of what? I don't know. But the bottom line is the market can set interest rates. The Fed doesn't need to set interest rates. Why do we need a Fed? We need a Fed to what? Print money? The Fed, if you ever break it down, I have a video that breaks it down. It's a ruse. It's a ruse. And I'm not a conspiracy nut, okay? It's just the way this thing is set up. It's a ruse that allows banks to pad their bottom lines. That's all. That's all this is. And the Federal Reserve helped create the inflation that we have now. For years, I would have Art Laffer and Peter Schiff on my program. Yeah, Peter's hawking gold, okay, but I like Peter. And you know, we would talk about the fact that the interest rates were artificially low during the Obama administration. 8 years of artificially low interest rates. Well, at some point, and quantitative easing, which is flooding the economy of dollars, well, at some point you have to pay the piper. We kept saying that. Well, guess what? COVID, the COVID period, the government shut down ostensibly because of COVID period, is what triggered it, finally. And the supply chain and all that, that wasn't Biden's fault. You know, I know it's easy for Republicans to come out and say that, but it's way more complex than that. Way more complex. Biden didn't help, of course, but shutting down the federal government and shutting down our economies and shutting down our states, what do you think's going to happen? And then during the shutdown, printing even more money and then having the helicopter money come down. I mean, it was just insanity, economic insanity. So right now, what we're dealing with the tariffs is the art of the deal. Go back to the art of the deal. And by the way, I think I heard that it's the #1 bestseller again on New York Times or Amazon. Donald Trump is playing hardball. And so when he is asked in public, you know, I've said publicly that it would be nice if he came out and said, you know, we want to negotiate with these countries, and he kind of has. He's basically said, China, yes, they're going to play hardball, but we want to talk to them, and they want to talk to us. But as Donald Trump said, I don't know exactly what this means, he says, China doesn't know how to start the negotiations. I don't know. Maybe a phone call to President Xi, or Xi calls Trump. That might be a way to start negotiations. Send over Marco Rubio. This is the art of the deal. The tariffs is the art of the deal. The tariffs are not be-all, end-all. And it's more complex than just tariffs. And I'll get into that in just a second. Art Laffer, who I love, who aforementioned, who I believe is a national treasure, came out and said, Donald Trump holds all the cards here. Donald Trump's doing the right thing. When Art Laffer comes out and says, this is good stuff, I'm sorry, but that's like almost a Milton Friedman moment. And so Art is all for this because he understands the big picture here. And the big picture is Donald Trump is trying to change the paradigm. It's a paradigm shifting moment, both domestically and internationally. I just hope that it can be, for this short-term pain, we have long-term gain, and I know we're going to have both, but I just hope that it outlives Donald Trump. But Art is all in favor of this. Some of the things that we don't see when that go beyond tariffs is important to keep in mind. When Donald Trump was sitting with Benjamin Netanyahu and they were talking about tariffs, it is interesting. He gave an example, and I just don't believe he would pull this example out of thin air. I think it's actual. I think they really do this. He said, there are certain tests, for example, given to U.S. cars by the Europeans that it's meant to make them fail. The vehicles fail the test. So if they fail the test, then they cannot be imported into the European Union. You see? So you give somebody a test designed to make that person fail, then they're not going to enter into the university or become a realtor or whatever, right? If you make it a fair test, obviously then there's a fair shot. So the example that Donald Trump used was they drop a bowling ball from 20 feet on the hood of the car, and if it leaves a dent, then you cannot import that Ford. Every once in a while, Donald Trump will say something like, I kind of go, huh? It takes, and then, you know, at the moment, I just kind of let it go and keep listening, and then I go back to it and say, what? Why would he just pull that out of thin air? And the answer is he wouldn't. That's probably what they do. Let's drop a bowling ball from 20 feet on the hood of a Ford, and if it leaves a dent, sorry, we cannot import Fords. Clunk. I mean, it's insanity. But, okay, that's, let's drop a pineapple on the Ford. See if it leaves. But there's just no way he would make that up. So that's what they do. These are other barriers that are not tariffs. There are quotas, too. Let's say they do let Fords in, but we'll only let in 5 Fords a month. Quotas is another barrier to trade. And, of course, the VAT tax. A VAT tax can be value-added tax. A VAT tax can be tailored to certain things. You can tax just pineapples, right? U.S. Hawaiian-grown pineapples, right? You can tax just Fords. And so if the Ford passes the bowling ball test, and if the Ford is allowed in under the quotas, one of the 5 Fords allowed in, then we're also going to stick this exorbitant tax on the Ford to make it way more expensive than a BMW in Europe. So how many vehicles is Ford going to sell under those circumstances? That's what Donald Trump is talking about. Sometimes Donald Trump doesn't have his mind is going, I think, so fast that he doesn't explain things very well. And just like Elon Musk. Elon Musk, if you ever try and listen to Elon, he's jumping around all over that. It's like, which thing are you talking about there? But that's what smart people often do. But if the end result of all this is bringing pharma back from China, and in particular, antibiotics. Again, you go to war with China, they produce 80-90% of our antibiotics. What are they going to do during that time? You think they're going to keep sending us the antibiotics? That is a national security issue. And for these senators and other people who are running around the country, and Rand Paul is one of them, and I love Rand Paul to a degree, but really, if you look at Rand Paul, what has he really done for you? I mean, I know he's a senator from one state and he only has 1 vote. But what has he really done other than to go on TV and just bitch and moan as a libertarian? And we love libertarians for the most part. But he's off base on a lot of things. And he's off base on this one, saying that it's 1930 all over again when Smoot-Hawley was passed. Well, it's not 1930 all over again. Because we're not in the thralls of a recession, and that's what was happening at the time. They passed Smoot-Hawley. And we also don't have Franklin Delano Roosevelt yes, I know Smoot-Hawley was passed under the waning moments of the Hoover administration, but it was during the FDR administration that Smoot-Hawley really got his teeth. And it was one aspect that hurt the economy, but it was Franklin Delano Roosevelt and his Marxist policies that blew open the U.S. economy. We don't have to revisit history, but of course they don't teach it that way in school. They don't teach a lot of things this way in school. They don't teach economics in school. They don't teach check writing in school. But they don't teach the reality of the Depression and how Franklin Roosevelt threw gasoline on the fire. And yeah, some people say that the only thing that got us out of the Depression was World War II. In a way, they're correct. It's just not that simple. So it's not so simple for Rand Paul to come out and say it's 1930 all over again. No, the dynamic is completely different. And remember, it was until 1913, the United States garnered most of its income through tariffs. Yeah. Remember, there was no income tax prior to 1913 in the 16th Amendment. So Rand Paul and the United States Senate need to get out of the way and let this percolate. And we'll do the, little bit of pain for the long-term gain. I firmly believe that the Senate needs to, because they're talking about they're wasting their time. They're talking about passing a bill that would curtail Donald Trump's tariffs. Well, first of all, you're not going to get a supermajority because he's even if it passes the House and it passes the Senate, he's going to veto it. So why don't you spend your time doing permanent changes instead of playing politics? Let Donald Trump be Donald Trump. You know, they used to say, let Reagan be Reagan. Let Trump be Trump. Let this thing play out. China's going to come to the table. They have to come to the table. Stop wasting your time, Congress. You only have about a year left. That's all we got before they start worrying about the election cycle. We may not even have a year. We need to enact permanent changes. Defund and eliminate the Department of Education. Just do it. Make English the official language. Do it. How about eliminate the Fed? I know you're not going to do it. You don't have the guts to do it. But that would be nice. How about term limits? I know you don't have the guts to do that either. But these are permanent structural changes that we need. And yeah, it's painful. But you know, what if, for example, what if you passed term limits, Congress, and you exempted everybody in Congress? Okay? Fine. You know, at least my daughter would benefit from it. I mean, I would even accept that. At least we got it. And you people out there who say, we don't need term limits. Term limits is an election. That's the theory, and that's the theory that the framers worked on, but they never would have imagined a Nancy Pelosi, or a Hakeem Jeffries, or a Maxine Waters, or or a Chuck Schumer, or any Republican, too, that's been there too long. They never would have imagined it because that's not what they set up. They set up a system where you got elected to Congress for 2 years and then you went home. That's not what we got. So that's why we need term limits. Because apparently the American people at large are too stupid to do what the framers wanted them to do. Sorry, but that's the reality we live in. Patricia writes me an email. Patricia says, I used to watch you on TV and loved your show. That was when OAN was still on my cable lineup. I miss watching you. You were the first person that was able to explain politics to me in plain, simple English. I will try to watch you on YouTube. Keep up the good work. Patricia, thank you. Andrew writes something similar. Not sure what happened to you on OANN, but we miss you there. Surprised you didn't land on Newsmax or even RSBC. I guess that's Right Side Broadcasting. Or America's Voice. Your voice is needed on TV. Listen, I appreciate it. Sometimes in television, because there are so many egos and there's a lot of politics involved, whether it's mainstream media or conservative so-called media, there's a lot of politics involved, and sometimes you just can't clear that hurdle. I mean, Bill O'Reilly will tell you that. Tucker Carlson will tell you that. There's a lot of politics involved. You don't see Tucker knocking on Newsmax's door because he's having a great time. I'm not necessarily saying I'm having a great time and I wouldn't go back if there was an offer on the table. It'd have to be a really tailored offer, if you will. But no one's knocking on my door for whatever reason. Maybe I'm damaged goods. I don't know what to tell you. I just know that I've always cherished our moments together, and I've always respected you, and I care about you, and I care about this country, and I've always tried to tell you the truth, and I will always try and speak the truth, because in the end, that's all we got. And the truth involves God, and the truth involves Christian principles, that this country was founded on Christianity, and whether people want to admit that or not, I don't care. I know what the truth is. You can argue with me or not. I don't care. But what I've always tried to do, people ask me, how did you stay so focused during the government shutdown ostensibly because of COVID? How did you know not to wear a mask? How did you know to say no to shutting down schools and shutting down churches and shutting down government? I'll never forget when Donald Trump came out and said 15 days to stop the spread, shut down government. I couldn't believe it. It was one of the darkest moments of my life. The hair stood up on the back of my neck. I knew it was the end right there. That Donald Trump, that was the biggest mistake that he made of his first term. Amy Comey Barrett, close second. Maybe that she's number one. I don't know. Hiring not Mick Mulvaney, but Reince Priebus, Mulvaney too for that matter, but Reince Priebus, getting these rhinos in his inner circle, huge mistakes. I'm not here to criticize and pick apart those mistakes, but the answer to the question is, how did I stay so centered and focused, was two things. One is being a Christian Bible, and the other is the United States Constitution. If between those two things, you meld those together, and then you go back and you think about everything that transpired during COVID, then you would have the same viewpoint I did. And that is, no way. I'm not doing any of this stuff. Don't shut things down. It's a virus. Plus, I was running the numbers. And I had early numbers that were saying, now, wait a minute. Even with the inflated BS numbers, where you go in for a heart attack and then you die, the death certificate is COVID, that's because the hospitals were getting more money for COVID deaths. It's just as simple as that. But when you intersect those two, you can't go wrong. You know two things, three things, multiple things, whatever. That when they shut down the beaches, like they did in Florida for a little while, and they did in California, and I was there. I was living at the beach at the time. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I knew, number one, that was wrong constitutionally. Number two, it was wrong morally. But just from an intuitive, common sense perspective, the freshest air in the world is blowing in from the Pacific. And when I was in San Diego and that was going down, I'm thinking to myself, this is cuckoo. I literally saw people arrested at the beach. Moonlight Beach, it's actually Encinitas, which is just north of San Diego. People went down there during the government shutdown, ostensibly because of COVID. They went down there to work out, to get fresh air, to be healthy, and they were arrested by the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. Shame on the San Diego County Sheriff's Department for that. A blight, a pox on you for that. You know, there are times when you have to say no, just like we learned during Hitler's Germany. If people said no, there'd be millions of Jews alive who would have lived through that moment. So, shame on you, San Diego County Sheriff's Department, for doing what you did. Shame on you. Nehemiah 4:14, Old Testament. Don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your families, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your homes. Fight, fight, fight. This is what Donald Trump is doing right now. You may not agree with the tactics. You may not understand the tactics, the tariffs. But he is fighting, fighting, fighting. He is living Nehemiah 4:14. He is fighting for your family. He is fighting for your sons. He is fighting for your daughters. He's doing it the best way he knows. Is it the best way? I don't know. But it is a way, and he's doing it for you. Stocks are down right now. My best advice to you is do what I did in 2008 and 2020 when the stock market plummeted. You know what I did? I bought into it. Genius. Look at me now. What am I doing? Yeah, it's painful. It's counterintuitive. But it's what Warren Buffett does. Be greedy when people are fearful. People are fearful. Buy into this. Pain today, MAGA tomorrow. Pain today, MAGA tomorrow. That's what this is all about. And so Donald Trump, yeah, he's causing some pain. But tomorrow, make America great. That's the entire reason for all of this. God bless you. Thank you for watching. I'm Graham Ledger. Remember, even when I'm wrong, I'm right. And evil can only prevail when good is silent.